we are not heading back to the 1970s, says the government this morning.
Well, the government may not wish to head back to the 1970s, but nobody is suggesting that they should. What the government should be doing is looking at what they can do now to reduce the price of food in our shops, because, of course, food inflation is running at a significantly higher level than the headline rate of inflation. So let me give you a couple of practical things the government could be doing now. Firstly, they could be looking at the digital services tax and that balancing tax between the online giants and our bricks and mortar businesses, and using money from raising digital services tax to create a fund, £1 billion fund for energy intensive industries to make them more readily able to produce food more cheaply. That's one thing they could do. Secondly, in my own area of trade, they could actually be negotiating a veterinary agreement, for example, with the EU, which would make it a lot easier to import agri-foods from the EU. So there's two practical things the government could do. But above all, what the government needs to do in terms of inflation is to provide political and economic stability. And that platform has been sadly lacking from the Conservatives over the past 18 months as we've churned through prime ministers and that disastrous Truss Kwarteng mini budget.
Is it right to ask supermarkets to cap prices?
I don't think that that is the right approach. I think there are, as I've already indicated, practical things that the government can and should be doing now. I mean, we've had in the past, in the 60s and 70s, governments of both colours have looked at this idea of trying to set prices. It's been tried with mixed success. But what we need to see now in the 2020s is the government actually gripping the problems that we have and offering practical solutions. Instead, this is a government, when it comes down to it, take, for example, their recent changes on the lifetime pensions allowance. Instead of finding a specific solution for doctors and the issue with their pensions, they gave this £1 billion tax break to the very richest. When it comes down to it and they have to make choices, this is not a government on the side of ordinary families.
I'm sure you heard me asking earlier the government minister about a story that we'd done here on Sky News, where parents were literally stealing baby formula because they could not afford to buy it because of the massive increase in price. And I asked the minister whether someone caught doing that, whether they should face the full weight of the law. He said it's up to each individual store. What do you think?
Well, if somebody commits a crime and they commit theft or shoplifting, then I think it's for the police, our criminal justice system, in terms of holding them to account. But the government has to take responsibility for the position that families up and down the country find themselves in terms of putting food on the table. I visit food banks on a quite regular basis. The people who work there do an absolutely tremendous job, but it is a national scandal, frankly, that there are so many food banks now after 13 years of Conservative rule, the failure to grow the economy, the failure to improve any of our public services. So the government has to take responsibility for tackling the really high food inflation that's affecting families up and down the country.
Just talk to me very quickly about Brexit, if you would, and these new trade deals. The deal that I'm looking at, giving a zero tariff trade on a lot of goods. What would Labour do to change the trade deal with Australia and New Zealand?
So we have today the Australia and New Zealand trade deals coming into effect. I think it is important that the country, having signed on the dotted line, it now sticks to what has been agreed. But of course, we would have had a different set of priorities. Liz Truss, for example, on the Australia trade deal, set a deadline against herself and then sacrificed swathes of our agricultural interests just to get a deal over the line. Clearly, we would drive a harder bargain. Take the Australia trade deal, which we will now build upon. We know that there's a shared agenda with the Labour government in Australia to tackle climate change, create the green jobs of the future. We're going to want to deepen that partnership. But above all, Kay, what we have to do, whether it's these trade deals or indeed other trade around the world, we have to support our exporters here in the UK to take advantage of the fact that tariff barriers are coming down. I've argued for climate export hubs in every nation and region of the UK, working with universities, innovators and the devolved administration, so we can actually export that climate technology of the future to the world. We need to stand beside our exporters.
What should Baroness Hallett do if the Cabinet Office doesn't hand over these WhatsApp messages and diaries by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon?
Well, look, I read very carefully what Baroness Hallett has said in her notice. She's got particular powers as the inquiry chair under, it's under these Section 21 powers as they're called. But I read very carefully what her views were about what the Cabinet Office, the government is claiming is not actually relevant. And it's clear from what she's written that she's unimpressed by what they're saying so far. Now, the government has appointed Baroness Hallett. She's hugely respected, independent. The government should be respecting what Heather Hallett is saying. The government should be complying with the orders that she makes, and they should be doing that. Firstly, because there are thousands of families out there who've lost loved ones during the COVID pandemic who deserve to hear the truth and not have a government trying to run away from it, but also because we have to learn the lessons from this health emergency for the future. So my strong position is that the government should listen to the independent chair that they themselves appointed.
OK, it's good to see you as always. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Pleasure.